The transport ship shook violently as another blast hit its side. T grabbed the metal bar above his seat and held on tight. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Around him, other passengers were screaming too. "We're under attack," someone yelled. T already knew that. He had been a combat instructor for the Terran Defense Corps for 12 years. He knew the sound of enemy fire when he heard it. He knew the feeling of a ship dying around him. The transport was not a military vessel. It carried civilians, scientists, and a few retired soldiers like himself. They had no weapons, no shields worth mentioning. They were flying through what was supposed to be safe space, heading to a colony world for a teaching conference. Now they were going to die. Another blast tore through the ship. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, painting everything in dim red. T could hear the hull groaning, metal bending in ways it should not bend. Then came the silence. The enemy had stopped firing. That was worse. T knew what came next: boarding parties. He looked around at the terrified faces of the other passengers. Old men, young women, children crying in their mothers' arms. None of them were fighters. None of them stood a chance. "Everyone stay calm," T said, his voice steady. "Stay together, do not resist." A young woman looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Who are they? What do they want?" Before T could answer, the main door exploded inward. Smoke and sparks filled the air. Through the haze, tall figures emerged. They were silver-skinned, with sharp features and cold violet eyes. They wore dark armor and carried curved black blades that seemed to drink in the light. Velari. T had heard stories about them. Everyone had. The Velari were a warrior species from the outer systems. They believed in honor, combat, and the superiority of the blade. They thought guns and bombs were weapons of cowards. They looked down on humans as weak, soft creatures who hid behind their technology. And they raided human ships for slaves and ransom. The Velari warriors moved through the transport with terrifying efficiency. They separated the passengers into groups. Those who resisted were struck down without mercy. Those who obeyed were bound and forced to kneel. T did not resist. He let them bind his wrists with cold metal cuffs. He let them push him to his knees. Fighting now would only get innocent people killed. He needed to wait, watch, learn. One of the Velari stopped in front of him. The warrior was tall, even by Velari standards, with scars running down one side of his face. He looked at T with contempt. "This one is different," the warrior said to his companions. "Look at his eyes. He is not afraid." Another Velari laughed. "He is human. They are all cowards. He is probably just too stupid to understand what is happening." T said nothing. He kept his face blank and his breathing steady. The scarred warrior grabbed T's chin and forced his head up. "What were you on this ship, human? A scientist? A merchant?" "A teacher," T said calmly. The warriors laughed again. "A teacher? How useful. Perhaps you can teach our young ones how to cry and beg for mercy." They dragged T and the other prisoners off the transport and onto the Velari warship. The inside of the alien vessel was dark and cold. The walls were covered in strange symbols and the bones of defeated enemies. The air smelled of metal and something else, something old and dangerous. T was thrown into a holding cell with 5 other humans. The cell was small, with no windows and only a single dim light in the ceiling. The floor was hard and cold. The other prisoners were broken. Some cried quietly. Others stared at nothing, their minds already shutting down from fear. One old man sat in the corner, praying to whatever gods he believed in. T sat with his back against the wall and closed his eyes. He needed to think. The Velari would either sell them as slaves or hold them for ransom. Either way, they would be kept alive for now. That gave him time. Time to learn the ship. Time to find weaknesses. Time to plan. Hours passed, maybe days. It was impossible to tell in the dark cell. Guards came occasionally to throw in small amounts of food and water. The food tasted terrible, but T forced himself to eat. He needed to keep his strength. On what he guessed was the third day, the cell door opened and two Velari guards entered. They pointed at T. "You, the teacher, come with us." T stood slowly and walked toward them. The other prisoners watched him go with hopeless eyes. The guards led him through winding corridors, past other cells filled with prisoners from different species. T memorized every turn, every door, every guard station they passed. Information was survival. Finally, they reached a larger room. It looked like some kind of interrogation chamber. There was a single chair in the center, bolted to the floor. Strange tools hung on the walls. Some of them were stained with old blood. But T's attention was drawn to the figure waiting for him. She was Velari, but different from the others he had seen. Younger, more refined. She wore lighter armor decorated with silver patterns that marked her as an officer. Her violet eyes were sharp and intelligent, studying him like he was some kind of puzzle to be solved. "Leave us," she said to the guards. They hesitated. "Commander Nara, are you sure? The human could be dangerous." She laughed softly. "Dangerous? Look at him. He is soft and weak like all his kind. I can handle one human." The guards bowed and left, closing the door behind them. Nara circled T slowly, her boots clicking on the metal floor. "So you are the teacher who shows no fear. My warriors find that curious. I find it annoying." T said nothing. "I am Commander Nara," she continued. "Second in command of this vessel. I have been given the task of extracting information from you." "What information?" T asked. "The locations of Terran military outposts, defense codes, fleet movements, anything useful." "I am just a teacher. I do not know military secrets." Nara stopped in front of him and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "We searched the records from your transport. You are Lieutenant T of the Terran Defense Corps, retired. You spent 12 years training soldiers how to fight. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending to be a simple teacher." T met her eyes steadily. "I trained soldiers, yes. That does not mean I know current military operations. I left the Corps 5 years ago." Nara leaned closer. Her violet eyes burned with intensity. "Then you will tell me what you do know, the training methods, the fighting styles, the weaknesses of human soldiers." "No." The word hung in the air between them. Simple, calm, final. Nara's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened with anger. She was not used to being refused. She was not used to humans who did not break at the first sign of pressure. "You do not understand your situation," she said coldly. "You are a prisoner on my ship. I can make your remaining time very painful." T looked at her calmly. "You can try." For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Human and Velari, prisoner and commander, two warriors measuring each other's strength. Nara turned away suddenly and walked to the wall where the tools hung. She selected a curved black blade and drew it from its sheath. The weapon was beautiful in a deadly way. Its edge gleamed even in the dim light. "This is a Reth," she said, turning back to face him. "The traditional weapon of the Velari people. We have used it for thousands of years. Every Velari child learns to wield one before they can walk." She moved toward him with the blade raised. Her movements were graceful, practiced, dangerous. Humans think they are civilized because they kill from far away with their guns and their bombs. But that is not strength. That is cowardice. True strength is standing face to face with your enemy and taking their life with your own hands. She pressed the blade against T's throat. The edge was cold and impossibly sharp. He could feel it biting into his skin, just barely breaking the surface. Nara's violet eyes burned into his. Any last words, human? T looked at the blade, then at her hand, then back at her face. And he smiled. "Yeah," he said softly, "you're gripping it incorrectly." The room went completely silent. Nara stared at T with an expression that shifted between shock and fury. No prisoner had ever spoken to her like this. No human had ever dared to criticize a Velari warrior's blade technique. It was unthinkable. It was insulting beyond measure. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. T remained perfectly calm. The blade was still pressed against his throat. A thin line of blood was already running down his neck, but his eyes showed no fear, only a strange, quiet confidence. "Your grip," he said simply. "It is wrong. Your thumb is too high on the hilt. You are sacrificing control for power. In a real fight, someone could disarm you in 2 moves, maybe less." Nara pressed the blade harder. More blood appeared. T did not flinch. "You dare lecture me about blade combat," she hissed. "I have trained with the Reth since I was a child. I have killed dozens in the arena. I am considered one of the finest blade fighters on this ship. Then imagine how many more you could have killed with proper technique." For a moment, Nara looked like she might simply cut his throat and be done with it. Her hand trembled slightly with rage. Her violet eyes burned with wounded pride. But she did not kill him. Instead, she took a step back and lowered the blade. She was breathing hard, fighting to control her anger. T watched her carefully, noting every detail of her reaction. "You are either very brave or very stupid," Nara said finally. "Maybe both," T admitted. Nara laughed despite herself. It was a short, sharp sound, more surprise than amusement. She looked at the wreath in her hand, then at her grip on the hilt. "Show me," she demanded. T raised an eyebrow. "Show you." "You claim my grip is wrong. Prove it. Show me the correct way." "My hands are bound." Nara hesitated. Every instinct told her this was dangerous. The human was a trained soldier. Freeing his hands could be a fatal mistake, but something else drove her forward. Curiosity, pride, the need to prove this arrogant human wrong. She pulled a key from her belt and unlocked his cuffs. The metal bands fell away, and T slowly rubbed his wrists to restore circulation. "If you try anything," Nara warned, "I will cut you down before you take 2 steps." "I understand." She handed him the wreath carefully, keeping her distance. T took the blade and held it up to the light, examining it closely. His movements were slow and deliberate, non-threatening, but Nara could see something change in his eyes. Recognition, respect, the look of a warrior holding a worthy weapon. "This is a beautiful blade," he said quietly. "The balance is excellent, the edge is perfect. Your smiths are truly skilled." "Our blades are the finest in the galaxy," Nara said proudly. "Now show me this grip you claim is so superior." T adjusted his hand on the hilt. The movement was small, subtle. His thumb shifted lower. His fingers repositioned slightly. From the outside, it looked almost identical to how Nara had been holding it. "Like this," he said. "The thumb here below the guard. The fingers wrapped firmly but not tight. This gives you control without sacrificing power. You can redirect force, change angles, respond to your opponent's movements." Nara frowned. "That is nearly the same as my grip." "Nearly. But in combat, nearly can mean the difference between life and death." He moved the blade in a slow arc, demonstrating. His wrist rolled smoothly and the blade followed like an extension of his arm. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, just pure, clean technique. "Your style relies on strength and aggression," T continued. "You attack directly, overwhelming your opponent with speed and power. But what happens when you face someone equally strong, equally fast?" "I adapt," Nara said. "How? Your grip locks you into certain angles of attack. If your enemy knows this, they can predict your movements. They can set traps. They can turn your strength against you." Nara's frown deepened. She wanted to argue, but something in his words rang true. She had faced opponents before who seemed to know exactly where her blade would go. She had always thought they were simply skilled. Now she wondered if there was more to it. "Where did you learn this?" she asked. T handed the blade back to her, handle first, a gesture of respect between warriors. Humans have not always had guns, he said. For most of our history, we fought with blades, swords, knives, spears. We spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other with sharp metal. But you abandoned it, Nara said dismissively. You chose the coward's way. We chose to survive. When guns were invented, those who clung to blades died. Those who adapted lived, but we did not forget. The old arts are still taught, still practiced, still honored. Nara looked at the wreath in her hand. She adjusted her grip the way he had shown her. It felt strange at first, unfamiliar. But as she moved the blade experimentally, she felt something different. More control, more options, more possibilities. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked suspiciously. "I am your enemy. I am holding you prisoner. Why help me become a better fighter?" T sat down on the cold floor and leaned back against the wall. For the first time since his capture, he looked tired. "Because I am a teacher," he said simply. "It is who I am. When I see someone doing something wrong, I want to correct it, even if that someone is pointing a blade at my throat." Nara stared at him for a long moment. This human was nothing like what she had expected. He was not weak. He was not cowardly. He faced death with a joke about her technique. He offered knowledge to his enemy without hesitation. "You are strange," she said finally, "even for a human." "I have been told that before." Nara sheathed the wreath and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the control panel and looked back at him. "I will return tomorrow," she said. "You will teach me more. And if I refuse, then I will continue my interrogation using more traditional methods." She gestured toward the tools on the wall. "The choice is yours." T smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I will teach you more." Nara left the room and guards came to take T back to his cell. As he walked through the corridors, his mind was racing. He had created an opportunity, a connection. The Velari commander was curious about him. That curiosity could be useful. Back in his cell, the other prisoners looked at him with wide eyes. The old man who prayed stopped and stared. "You are alive," he whispered. "How are you alive?" "I gave her something she wanted," T said. "What could a human possibly give a Velari?" T lay down on the hard floor and closed his eyes. "Knowledge, something they do not have." The other prisoners exchanged confused looks, but T did not explain further. He needed to rest. Tomorrow would bring another test, another chance to learn about his captors, another step toward whatever came next. In her quarters, Nara stood before a mirror, practicing her grip on the wreath. Over and over, she adjusted her thumb, repositioned her fingers, and moved through basic forms. The new technique felt awkward, wrong. Every instinct screamed at her to return to her old ways. But she forced herself to continue. She thought about the human, about his calm eyes and quiet confidence, about the way he had smiled with a blade at his throat. No fear, no panic, just that strange, knowing smile. What kind of species produced warriors like that? She had been taught that humans were weak, inferior, creatures who hid behind machines because they could not face honest combat. But T did not fit that image. He moved like a fighter. He thought like a fighter. He faced death like a fighter. And his knowledge was real. Already, she could feel the difference in her technique. The new grip gave her options she had never considered, angles of attack that her old style could not achieve. It was like discovering a whole new language for combat. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She sheathed the blade quickly and called out, "Enter." A young officer stepped inside and bowed. "Commander Nara, Captain Dury requests your presence in the command center." Nara nodded. "Tell him I will be there shortly." The officer left and Nara took a deep breath. Captain Dury was her superior and the master of this vessel. He was old, traditional, and deeply suspicious of anything foreign. If he learned she was taking lessons from a human prisoner, there would be consequences. She would need to be careful. But she would not stop. Not yet. The human had shown her something real, something valuable. She wanted to learn more. Whatever the cost. Days passed on the Velari warship. T lost count of exactly how many. In the darkness of his cell, time had no meaning. There was only the occasional meal, the distant hum of the ship's engines, and the growing despair of his fellow prisoners. But for T, things were different. Every day, sometimes twice a day, guards came to take him to the interrogation room. And every time, Nara was waiting for him, not with questions about military secrets, not with threats or torture tools, but with her blade in hand and hunger in her eyes. She wanted to learn. And T taught her. He showed her footwork patterns from ancient Terran martial arts. He explained how to read an opponent's body language, predicting their movements before they made them. He demonstrated techniques for redirecting force, using an attacker's strength against them. He taught her that combat was not just about power. It was about thinking, adapting, finding the weakness in every defense. Nara was a fast learner, faster than most students T had trained in his years with the Terran Defense Corps. Her natural talent was obvious. Her discipline was absolute. She practiced every technique over and over until it became part of her muscle memory. And slowly, her attitude toward him changed. At first, she had treated him with cold contempt, the way a master might treat a useful tool. But as the lessons continued, something shifted. She began asking questions about human culture, human history, human warriors of the past. "Tell me about your blade masters," she said one day, sitting across from him on the floor of the interrogation room. They had finished the day's training and both were tired. "The great fighters of your species." T thought for a moment. There have been many. In a place called Japan, there were warriors called samurai who dedicated their entire lives to the sword. They believed that the blade was an extension of their soul. Their soul. Their spirit, their essence. They thought that a warrior and their weapon were one being, not two. Nara nodded slowly. "We believe something similar. The wreath is bound to its owner in a ceremony when they come of age. It becomes part of them. Then perhaps our species are not so different." Nara's violet eyes flickered with something complicated. Perhaps. Another day, she asked about the wars humans had fought. T told her about ancient battles, massive conflicts where millions of warriors clashed with nothing but steel and courage. He spoke of commanders who changed the course of history with brilliant tactics. He described soldiers who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. Nara listened with growing fascination and growing confusion. "These stories do not match what I was taught," she admitted. "We learned that humans are cowards who hide behind their machines, that you abandoned honor long ago, that your species knows nothing of real combat." "Your teachers were wrong," T said simply. "Were they? Then why do humans fight with guns now? Why not return to the blade?" T was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because we adapted," he said finally. "That is what humans do. We change, we evolve. When the world changed around us, we changed with it. Those who could not change died. Those who could survive lived and passed on their knowledge. But that means abandoning tradition, abandoning honor." "Does it?" T looked at her steadily. "Is honor about the weapon you use, or is it about how you face your enemy? A human soldier who charges into battle knowing they might die, is that not honorable? A doctor who runs toward danger to save lives, is that not courageous?" Nara had no answer. The questions troubled her in ways she did not fully understand. On the seventh day, she came to him with a different request. "I want you to fight me," she said. T raised an eyebrow. "Fight you?" "A practice match, no killing strikes. I want to test what I have learned." "And if I beat you?" Nara smiled dangerously. "You will not." She tossed him a training blade, dull but weighted like the real thing. T caught it and stood slowly, rolling his shoulders to loosen the muscles. He had not moved properly in days. His body was stiff. His reflexes were slow. But as his hand closed around the weapon's hilt, something changed. His posture shifted. His eyes sharpened. The tired prisoner disappeared, replaced by something else, something older, deadlier. Nara noticed the transformation immediately. Her grip on her own training blade tightened. "Ready?" she asked. "When you are." She attacked without warning, a lightning-fast strike aimed at his chest. T moved like water, sliding to the side and deflecting her blade with minimal effort. His counter came instantly, a short jab toward her exposed side. Nara blocked, but barely. They separated and circled each other. "Good," T said. "Your speed has improved. Stop talking and fight." She came at him again, a complex series of strikes from multiple angles. Her technique was cleaner than before, more controlled. She was using everything he had taught her. But T was not just a teacher, he was a master. He flowed through her attacks like smoke, never staying in one place, never giving her a solid target. His blocks were minimal but perfectly timed. His counters were precise and calculated. Every movement served a purpose. Within minutes, Nara was breathing hard. Sweat ran down her silver skin. She had never worked this hard in a practice match. She had never faced an opponent who could read her so completely. T, meanwhile, showed no signs of exhaustion. His breathing was steady. His movements remained sharp. He was not trying to beat her. He was teaching her, even now, showing her the gaps in her defense with every exchange. Finally, he saw his opening. He stepped inside her guard, trapped her blade with his own, and swept her legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard, and before she could recover, his training blade was at her throat. The room went silent. Nara stared up at him with wide eyes. In all her years of training in dozens of arena fights, she had never been defeated so completely, so easily. "How?" she whispered. T offered her his hand. "You are talented, one of the best natural fighters I have ever seen, but talent is not enough. Experience matters. I have been doing this for 30 years. She took his hand and let him pull her up. Her pride was wounded, but underneath the shame there was something else. Respect. Real, honest respect. "Teach me more," she said. Over the following days, their training intensified. T held nothing back. He showed her advanced techniques that he had taught only to the most elite Terran soldiers. He explained battle psychology, the mental games that warriors played with each other. He trained her to think 3 moves ahead, to see patterns where others saw chaos. And Nara absorbed it all like a plant drinking rain. But their sessions did not go unnoticed. The guards talked. The crew whispered. Word spread through the ship that Commander Nara was spending hours every day with the human prisoner. Some thought she was conducting extended interrogations. Others suspected something stranger. Eventually, the rumors reached Captain Dury. He summoned Nara to the command center and confronted her directly. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Are you taking combat lessons from a human?" Nara stood tall and met his eyes without flinching. "I am learning their techniques. Understanding the enemy makes us stronger." "Understanding?" Dury's voice dripped with contempt. "You are being contaminated. You are letting that creature poison your mind with alien ways." "I am improving my skills." "You are disgracing yourself. And this ship." Dury leaned forward, his scarred face twisted with anger. "I am ordering you to stop these sessions immediately. The human will be dealt with appropriately." "What does that mean?" "He will fight in the arena, a public execution to restore proper order." Dury smiled coldly. "Your pet project dies tomorrow." Nara felt her blood turn to ice. She wanted to argue, to protest, to demand that he change his mind, but she was still second in command. Dury was still her captain. In the rigid hierarchy of Velari society, his word was law. She bowed stiffly and left the command center. Back in her quarters, she stood before the mirror again. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes haunted by a choice she never expected to face. The human had taught her more in 2 weeks than she had learned in years of formal training. He had shown her a different way of fighting, a different way of thinking. He had treated her with respect, even though she was his captor. And now he was going to die. Because of her. She stayed awake all night, struggling with her thoughts, duty to her people, loyalty to her captain, honor to her traditions. These were the pillars of her life. These were the things she had believed in since childhood. But what about truth? What about justice? What about the debt she owed to a teacher who had given her knowledge without asking for anything in return? As the ship's artificial lights brightened for the morning cycle, Nara made her decision. She would not let T die, whatever the cost. The arena was located in the lower decks of the warship, a circular pit surrounded by rising seats where the crew could gather to watch combat. It was stained with old blood and decorated with the weapons of fallen fighters. For the Velari, it was a sacred place, a temple of honor where warriors proved their worth through violence. For T, it would be his execution ground. He was dragged from his cell by 4 guards and marched through corridors filled with watching crew members. They jeered at him, spat at him, called him names in their harsh alien tongue. He walked with his head high and his back straight, showing no reaction to their hatred. In his cell, the other human prisoners had wept when they took him. They knew what the arena meant. They knew he would not return. T had simply smiled and told them not to give up hope. The arena was packed when he arrived. Hundreds of Velari filled the seats, their violet eyes gleaming with anticipation. They loved blood. They loved watching the weak fall to the strong. Today, they would watch a human die at the hands of their greatest warriors. Captain Dury stood on a raised platform overlooking the pit. He wore his ceremonial armor, polished and gleaming. Beside him stood Nara, her face carefully blank. She had been ordered to witness the execution as a reminder of her place. She had not looked at T once since he entered. Warriors of the Velari, Dury's voice boomed across the arena. Today we restore our honor. We show the galaxy what happens to those who dare to challenge our ways. This human thought he could corrupt one of our own with his foreign techniques. He thought he could make us weak. He was wrong. The crowd roared its approval. He will face 3 of our finest fighters in succession. When he falls, his body will be ejected into space, and we will continue on our glorious path. More cheering, more stomping of feet. The sound was deafening. T was pushed into the pit. A guard tossed a blade at his feet, a simple training weapon, while his opponents would carry real Reth blades. The message was clear. This was not meant to be a fair fight. This was meant to be a slaughter. He picked up the blade and tested its weight. It was poorly balanced, with a dull edge that would barely cut bread. He would have to be perfect to survive. The first fighter entered the arena. He was young, muscular, eager to prove himself. He carried his Reth with the traditional Velari grip, his thumb high on the hilt exactly as Nara had once held her blade. "Ready to die, human," the young warrior taunted. T shifted his stance slightly. "Let us find out." The warrior charged with a roar, bringing his blade down in a powerful overhead strike. T stepped to the side at the last moment and let the attack pass harmlessly. His counter was swift, a precise strike to the warrior's wrist that made him drop his blade with a cry of pain. Before anyone could react, T kicked the fallen Reth out of reach and pressed his training blade against the warrior's throat. The arena went silent. No one had expected the human to win. No one had expected him to win so easily. Dury's face twisted with rage. Next fighter now. The second warrior was older, more experienced. She moved with careful precision, testing T's defenses before committing to attacks. She had clearly watched the first fight and learned from her companion's mistake. But T had been fighting for 3 decades. He had trained thousands of soldiers. He had developed techniques specifically designed to counter warriors who relied on strength and tradition. He broke her guard in 12 moves and disarmed her in 15. The crowd had stopped cheering. They watched in stunned silence as their warriors fell one after another to a creature they had been taught to despise. "This is impossible," someone muttered. "He is just a human. He is cheating somehow. There must be some trick." Dury was trembling with fury. He had intended this to be a demonstration of Velari superiority. Instead, it was becoming a humiliation. "Enough games," he snarled. "Send in Vorn." A ripple of excitement passed through the crowd at the name. Vorn was the ship's champion, a massive warrior covered in scars from 100 arena fights. He had never been defeated. He had killed opponents from a dozen different species. He entered the arena carrying 2 wraith blades, one in each hand. His eyes were cold and empty, the eyes of a born killer. "Finally," he growled, looking at T, "a challenge." T was tired. The previous fights had drained him. His muscles ached. His reflexes were slowing. Against a fresh opponent of Vorn's caliber, his chances were slim. But he did not show it. He raised his training blade and settled into a defensive stance. "Whenever you are ready." Vorn attacked with devastating speed. His dual blades moved in complex patterns, creating a wall of sharp metal that seemed impossible to penetrate. T retreated, blocking and dodging, buying time while he searched for an opening. But Vorn was relentless. He pressed forward, driving T toward the arena wall. Every block sent shocks of pain through T's arms. Every dodge came a little slower than the last. The crowd began to cheer again. This was what they had come to see. This was the execution they had been promised. T's back hit the wall, nowhere left to run. Vorn smiled and raised both blades for the killing stroke. And then something unexpected happened. A wraith blade flew through the air and embedded itself in the ground at T's feet. A real blade, sharp and perfectly balanced. The crowd gasped and looked toward the source. Nara stood at the edge of the pit, her arms still extended from the throw. Her face was pale but determined. "That is enough," she said. Dury stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done from the beginning." Nara jumped down into the arena and walked to stand beside T. She drew her own wraith and faced Vorn. "This fight is over." "You dare," Dury's voice shook with rage. "You dare betray your people for this human." "I am not betraying anyone. I am following the true code of the warrior. An honorable fight, an honorable opponent. T has proven his worth 3 times over. Continuing this execution is not justice. It is murder." The crowd murmured uncertainly. Some agreed with her words, others were outraged, but no one moved. No one knew what to do. Vorn looked between Nara and T, his expression unreadable. 2 against 1. That hardly seems fair. "Then walk away," Nara said. "Let us pass." For a long moment, Vorn was silent. Then slowly he lowered his blades. "I fight warriors," he said quietly, "not politicians. This has become something else." He turned and walked out of the arena without looking back. Dury was screaming now, ordering guards to seize both Nara and T. But the guards hesitated. They respected Nara. They had served under her for years. Raising weapons against her felt wrong. Nara took advantage of their hesitation. She grabbed T's arm and pulled him toward a service exit. "Move," she hissed. "We have minutes before they organize." They ran through corridors, Nara leading the way through paths she knew by heart. Alarms began blaring behind them. The ship's lighting turned red. "Where are we going?" T asked. "Escape pods. There is a Terran patrol route not far from here. If we can get clear of the ship, we might reach them. And if we cannot, then we die together." She glanced at him with fierce determination. "I made my choice. I am not going back." They reached the escape pod bay and found it guarded by 6 warriors. Nara did not slow down. She attacked with the techniques T had taught her, moving like water, striking like lightning. T joined her, fighting with the real wrath she had given him. Together they were unstoppable. The guards fell one by one, and within moments the path to the escape pods was clear. T opened the nearest pod and gestured for Nara to enter. She hesitated, looking back the way they had come. "My people will hunt me forever," she said quietly. "I will never be able to go home." "Then we will find you a new home." T put a hand on her shoulder. "You saved my life. I will not forget that." Nara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and climbed into the pod. T followed, sealed the door, and hit the launch button. The pod shot into the darkness of space, leaving the warship behind. The escape pod was small. 2 seats, minimal life support, and a basic navigation system. Through the tiny window, T could see the Velari warship growing smaller behind them. Lights flickered across its hull as it prepared to give chase. "They will send fighters," Nara said, her voice tight. She was working the controls, trying to squeeze every bit of speed from the pod's limited engines. "This thing has no weapons, no shields. If they catch us in open space, we are dead. Then we need to make sure they do not catch us." T pulled up the navigation display and studied the local star charts. The area was mostly empty, far from major trade routes. But there, at the edge of sensor range, he spotted something. A cluster of signatures that might be a Terran patrol. "There," he pointed. "Head for those coordinates. That is 20 minutes away. We will be in weapons range of their fighters in 10. Then we need to buy ourselves time." Nara looked at him. "How?" T thought quickly. The pod had no weapons, but it did have emergency equipment. Flares, debris charges, communication systems. Separately, they were useless for combat. Together, they might create a distraction. "Can you pilot us through an asteroid field?" "Probably." "Why?" "Because there is one between us and those ships. If we can reach it, we can use the rocks for cover. Make them chase us instead of just shooting us down." Nara nodded grimly and adjusted their course. The pod lurched as it changed direction, heading toward a scattered belt of tumbling rocks that filled the space ahead. Behind them, 3 Velari fighters launched from the warship and began pursuit. "They are faster than us," Nara reported. "Much faster." "I know, just get us to those asteroids." The next few minutes were the longest of T's life. He watched the pursuing fighters grow closer on the display, their weapons charging for the kill shot. He could imagine Duri on the warship screaming orders, demanding that the traitor and her human pet be destroyed. But Nara was an excellent pilot. She pushed the escape pod to its limits, squeezing through gaps between asteroids that should have been impossible. She used the rocks as shields, keeping them between the pod and the fighters. Every time the enemy thought they had a clear shot, she twisted away at the last second. The fighters tried to follow, but they were designed for open space combat, not this kind of close-quarters maneuvering. One of them clipped an asteroid and spun out of control, crashing into another rock in a bloom of fire. 2 left. "They are getting smarter," Nara said through gritted teeth. "They are trying to box us in." T activated the emergency flares and tossed them out of the pod's rear port. Bright lights exploded behind them, momentarily blinding the fighter's sensors. In that instant of confusion, Nara dove through a narrow gap and emerged on the other side of the asteroid belt. Clear space ahead. And there, growing larger by the second, was the most beautiful sight T had ever seen. A Terran patrol ship, its guns already swinging toward the Velari fighters. "Unidentified escape pod, this is the TDS Herald. Identify yourself immediately." T grabbed the communication controls. "Herald, this is Lieutenant T of the Terran Defense Corps. I was captured by Velari raiders 2 weeks ago. I have escaped with help from a Velari defector. We need immediate assistance." A pause, then a different voice came through, deeper and more authoritative. "Lieutenant, this is Captain Yun. We are reading two hostile fighters on approach. Stand by for cover fire. The herald opened up with its point defense weapons. Bright lines of energy streaked across space, forcing the Velari fighters to break off their pursuit. They circled at a distance, unwilling to engage a warship directly. Nara let out a breath she had been holding. They will not attack now, not with your ship protecting us. They will return to the warship and report what happened. T looked at her. You know what that means. Yes, the Velari High Command will issue orders to find and kill me. I am a traitor now, an exile. There is no going back. The Herald's tractor beam locked onto their pod and began pulling them toward the ship's landing bay. As they drifted closer, T could see figures gathering at the viewports, watching them approach. What will your people do to me? Nara asked quietly. I do not know, T admitted. You are an enemy combatant. Normally you would be a prisoner of war, but you helped me escape. You saved my life. That counts for something. Enough to keep them from executing me. I will make sure of it. T met her eyes steadily. I owe you a debt. I do not forget my debts. The pod settled onto the landing bay deck with a gentle thump. Through the window, T could see armed soldiers taking positions around them. They were being cautious, smart. Let me go first, he said. Stay in the pod until I signal that it is safe. He opened the hatch and stepped out with his hands raised. The soldiers tensed but did not fire. Lieutenant T, one of them called out. That is me. Sir, we received your distress signal. Can you confirm your identity? T recited his service number, his commanding officer's name, and several code phrases that only a real Defense Corps officer would know. The soldiers relaxed slightly. What about the other person in the pod? The lead soldier asked. A Velari defector. She helped me escape captivity. She has valuable intelligence and nowhere else to go. T lowered his hands. She is not a threat. There was murmuring among the soldiers. Several of them clearly did not like the idea of a Velari on their ship, but discipline held. We will need to debrief both of you, the lead soldier said, and the commander will make the final decision about what to do with the alien. I understand. T turned and gestured to the pod. Slowly, carefully, Nara emerged. She kept her hands visible and made no sudden movements. The soldiers watched her with obvious suspicion, but no one raised a weapon. Over the following days, T and Nara were questioned extensively. Intelligence officers wanted to know everything about the Velari ship, its crew, its mission, its capabilities. Nara answered their questions honestly, holding nothing back. She had made her choice. There was no point in keeping secrets now. When the debriefings finally ended, Captain Yun met with T privately. She is genuine, Yun said. Our analysts believe she is telling the truth. She really did betray her own people to save you. I know. The question is what to do with her now. Command is not sure whether to treat her as a guest, a refugee, or a prisoner. T leaned forward. Let me take responsibility for her. I was a combat instructor for 12 years. I can continue that work with her assistance. She knows Velari tactics inside and out. That knowledge could save lives. Yun considered this. You are suggesting we trust an alien warrior who might still be loyal to her people. I am suggesting we give her a chance to prove herself. She gave up everything to help me. The least we can do is give her an opportunity to build a new life. After a long silence, Yun nodded. I will recommend it to command. No promises. Weeks later, T and Nara stood in a Terran training facility on a colony world far from the frontier. They wore instructor uniforms, their names displayed on badges. Around them, young soldiers practiced combat techniques, a mixture of human styles and adapted Velari forms. They are learning quickly, Nara observed. They have good teachers. She glanced at him. Do you think this will make a difference? A few new techniques in a galaxy full of enemies. T watched a young woman successfully disarm her sparring partner using the grip adjustment he had taught Nara so many weeks ago. The same correction he had made with a blade at his throat. Everything starts somewhere, he said. One lesson, one student, one change at a time. Eventually, those small differences add up to something bigger. Nara was quiet for a moment, then she smiled just slightly. You really are a teacher. I told you, it is who I am. Across the galaxy, the Velari High Command issued new orders. Find the traitor, kill her human mentor, erase this shame from history. But by then, it was already too late. The knowledge had spread. Human soldiers were training in hybrid techniques. Velari methods were being studied, analyzed, improved upon. And on a dozen worlds, instructors repeated a story about a prisoner who smiled at death and taught his captor a better way to hold a blade. The humans were adapting again. They always did.